The letter arrived on a Tuesday, borne by a London courier whose polished boots seemed to disdain the Hertfordshire mud. I watched from the window of my modest country home as the man handed the missive to Mrs. Henshaw, my housekeeper and surrogate mother these past 12 years. Miss Eleanor, she called, her voice carrying the tremor of one who recognizes trouble when it arrives in fine parchment. A letter from your father. I set down my sketchbook, the half-finished drawing of the old oak tree by the stream forgotten. The charcoal smudged my fingers as I took the letter, breaking the familiar crest of my father's seal, a lion rampant, gold on crimson wax. I had not seen that seal since I was 10 years old, when my father remarried and decided a country existence better suited a girl of my temperament while he and his new wife took up residence in London with my stepsister, Clarissa. Dearest Eleanor, the time has come for you to take your rightful place in society. Your stepmother and I wish you to join us in London for the season. Arrangements have been made for your journey. We anticipate your arrival within the fortnight. Affectionately, your father. The words were formal, distant, entirely unlike the man who had once bounced me on his knee and called me his little lioness. 12 years of distance cannot be mended with a summons. They want me in London, I said, handing the letter to Mrs. Henshaw. For the season. Her kind face folded into worried lines. After all this time? Why now? That question haunted me during the 3-day journey to London in my father's surprisingly well-appointed carriage. It whispered to me as the city's noise and stench replaced the clean country air. It shouted when I saw the townhouse on Grosvenor Square, grand, imposing, a monument to my father's success and my own exclusion. The butler, a man so stern he seemed carved from marble, showed me to a drawing-room done in shades of cream and gold. And there they were, my father, older, heavier, a stranger in his own skin, my stepmother, Lady Beatrice, a vision of cool elegance in lavender silk, and my stepsister, Clarissa, a porcelain doll of 18 with perfect golden curls and eyes the color of a winter sky. Eleanor, my father said, rising. He took my hands, his grip uncertain. You look well. Country air agrees with me, I replied, withdrawing my hands. The silence stretched, taut as a violin string. Lady Beatrice broke it with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. Welcome, my dear. We have so looked forward to your arrival. Clarissa, do greet your sister. Clarissa floated forward, her gaze assessing my travel-worn dress. We have much to do, she announced. Your wardrobe is entirely unsuited to London. Mamma has engaged a modiste. We begin tomorrow. Thus began the whirlwind. Madame Leclerc, a tiny Frenchwoman with pins perpetually in her mouth, measured me for morning dresses, walking dresses, evening gowns of silk and satin and gossamer thin muslin. Bonnets adorned with ribbons and flowers arrived in boxes. Kid gloves, silk stockings, dancing slippers, a trousseau fit for a queen or a bride. Why this sudden generosity? I asked Clarissa one afternoon as we sat in the morning room. She was embroidering a handkerchief with excruciating precision. For 12 years I was an afterthought. Now I am being draped in finery. What does father want? She didn't look up from her stitches. You are 21. It is time you married. And you have a fiancé, I pressed. The Viscount Thorne. I've heard the rumors. He is to be your husband in a month. Why am I here now? The needle paused. A tiny drop of crimson bloomed on the white linen where she had pricked her finger. The Viscount is a complicated man, she said softly. The rumors. They are not entirely unfounded. A chill traced my spine. Then why marry him? Her eyes, when she finally met mine, held a desperate fear. Because Papa arranged it. Because his fortune is immense, his lineage impeccable. Because I have no choice. The pieces clicked into place with dreadful clarity. The lavish wardrobe, the sudden summons in the midst of Clarissa's engagement season. I was not here to find a husband. I was here to be a husband's wife. Clarissa's husband. I confronted my father that evening in his study, the scent of port and regret hanging in the air. You mean to marry me to Viscount Thorne, I stated, my voice surprisingly steady. He flinched, his gaze dropping to his ledger. Clarissa is unsuited to the match. She is delicate. The Viscount is a man of strong passions. And I am not delicate. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You sent me away because I was too wild, too outspoken. Now you call me back because you need someone hardy enough to withstand a brutish husband. How convenient, Eleanor, please. He rubbed his temples. It is a brilliant match. Thorne is powerful, wealthy. You will want for nothing. Except affection. Except respect. Except a life not lived in fear. I leaned forward, planting my hands on his desk. The rumors say he has a violent temper. They say he is a recluse who shuns society. They say he. I felt a flush rise on my cheeks but forced the words out. They say his physical nature is as imposing as his person, that women fear the marriage bed with him. My father's face reddened. Gossip and innuendo. The man is a peer of the realm. He needs an heir. Clarissa cannot provide one. She has a constitutional weakness. You are strong. You always have been. So that was it. I was to be a broodmare, traded to a man reputed to be a monster because my stepsister was too frail to risk. The injustice of it burned through my veins, hotter than any anger I'd ever known. But anger, I had learned in my years of solitude, was a cold and useless thing. Strategy was warmer. Purpose, warmer still. I want to meet him, I said. The betrothal papers are being drawn. I will meet him, I repeated, iron in my tone. Or I will return to Hertfordshire and you can explain to your terrifying Viscount why his robust bride has fled. The first meeting was arranged at the Rutledge Ball, one of the major events of the season. Lady Beatrice dressed me in a gown of emerald green silk that made my auburn hair look like fire and my hazel eyes almost gold. To catch his attention, she said, but I knew it was a taunt. A vibrant, untamed creature presented to a man who supposedly broke fragile things. The ballroom was a kaleidoscope of light and sound. I stood near a potted palm, observing. Clarissa clung to her mother's side, pale as a ghost. And then, a ripple moved through the crowd. A path cleared. He entered. The rumors of his size were not exaggerated. He stood a head taller than any other man in the room, his shoulders broad enough to block the light from a chandelier. He was dressed in severe black, his cravat tied in a simple knot, no fobs or seals adorning his person. His hair was the color of rich espresso, swept back from a forehead that suggested intellect, and his face. Handsome was too mild a word. It was a face of stark, dramatic lines, a blade-straight nose, a firm jaw shadowed with dark stubble, lips that looked neither prone to smiling nor to kindness. But his eyes were what arrested me. A deep, stormy gray, they scanned the room as if it were a battlefield, missing nothing, desiring none of it. This was Alexander Kane, Viscount Thorne. The man I was to marry. I watched women subtly turn away, their laughter dying as he passed. I watched men offer stiff nods, respect mingled with wariness. He was a predator in a pen of peacocks, and they all knew it. My father approached him, Lady Beatrice and a trembling Clarissa in tow. I saw the Viscount's eyes flick to Clarissa, then away, disinterested. A brief conversation ensued. Then, those storm-gray eyes lifted and found me across the room. He stared. Not with the polite curiosity of a suitor, but with the intense, assessing focus of a naturalist confronting a previously uncatalogued species. He excused himself from my family and began to walk toward me. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. He stopped before me, an oak tree to my sapling. I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze, and I did so without flinching. Miss Eleanor Ashford, he said. His voice was a low rumble, like distant thunder, vibrating deep in my bones. "Lord Thorne," I replied, dipping the barest curtsy. "You have the advantage of me. You know who I am, but I only know of you." A flicker of something, surprise, amusement, crossed his stark features. "And what do you know of me?" "That you are rich, titled, and in need of a wife. That you prefer solitude to society. That you are taller than any man in this room and, if the rumors are true, proportioned accordingly." I had the immense satisfaction of seeing his eyes widen slightly. A blush would have been satisfying on another man, on him, it was a seismic shift. He leaned closer, and I caught his scent, sandalwood, leather, and something purely male. "You are either very brave or very foolish to repeat such gossip to my face," he murmured, his breath stirring the tendrils of hair at my temple. "I am from the country, my lord. We have little use for pretense. I speak plainly. Do you?" He studied me for a long moment. "I find pretense exhausting. Your stepsister, for example, pretends not to be terrified of me. It is tedious. And you think I will not be terrified?" "I think," he said, his gaze dropping to my mouth for a heartbeat before returning to my eyes, "that you are not like any woman I have ever met. Your father wrote that you were hearty and biddable. He appears to have been wrong on both counts. Hearty, perhaps. Biddable, never." I held his gaze, a current of pure, electric challenge passing between us. "Do you wish for a biddable wife, Lord Thorne?" The corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile, but it was the ghost of one. "I find I have no taste for porcelain. It shatters too easily." My heart hammered against my ribs, but not from fear. From exhilaration. Here was the beast, and he was not what they said. Not entirely. There was intelligence in his eyes, and a profound loneliness that called to the loneliness in my own soul. "Porcelain is for display," I said softly, so only he could hear. "I am not for display." He was silent, his eyes searching mine. The noise of the ball faded to a distant hum. In that moment, it was only him and me, standing on the precipice of something immense. "Dance with me," he commanded, but it sounded like a question. "I would be delighted." He led me to the floor for a waltz. His hand at my waist was large, warm, possessive through the thin silk. He held me with a certainty that was not brutal, but assured. We moved together as if we had practiced for a lifetime. He was a superb dancer, powerful and graceful. "They say you have a temper," I said as we turned. "They are correct." "Do you lose it with women?" His grip tightened infinitesimally. "I have never struck a woman, nor would I. My temper is reserved for fools, dishonorable men, and badly tied cravats." I couldn't suppress a small laugh. "And which am I?" "You, Miss Ashford, are a mystery. One I believe I should like to solve." The dance ended. He released me slowly, his fingers trailing from my waist. "I will call on you tomorrow. We will ride in the park." It was not a request. I found I did not want it to be. "I look forward to it, my lord." He bowed and walked away, leaving me breathless in the center of the ballroom. The stares of the ton were palpable, shock, envy, pity. They saw a lamb led to slaughter. They did not see the lamb had teeth and a plan that he did not retreat. He was not scared of rejection. The challenge was far more thrilling. He was a man who had been given a practical, unappealing arrangement and had found something unexpected. So had I. That night, in the opulent prison of my new bedroom, I did not tremble. I plotted. My father and stepmother thought they were sacrificing the untamable daughter to secure their own comfort. Clarissa thought she was escaping a fate worse than death. The Viscount thought he was acquiring a durable wife to bear his heirs. But I, Eleanor Ashford, was no one's sacrifice, no one's escape, no one's broodmare. I had felt the heat in his touch, seen the spark of interest in those stormy eyes. He thought he was solving a mystery. I would become an addiction. He would not just marry me. He would crave me. And I would crave him. The rumors of his size, his passion. They no longer frightened me. They ignited a curious, molten heat low in my belly. I was not like the delicate ladies of the ton. I had always been different. I liked different things. I wanted not a polite union, but a consuming fire. And as for the rest, the happily ever after, the beautiful twins, well, a woman must have her dreams. But first, she must win the war. I fell asleep with the memory of his hand on my waist and the scent of sandalwood on my skin, a smile on my lips. The game was afoot. The following afternoon, a magnificent black stallion and a gentle chestnut mare were brought around to Grosvenor Square. Lord Thorne arrived not in a polished barouche but on horseback, looking like a conqueror from a bygone era in his riding clothes of dark blue and buckskin. "Can you ride, Miss Ashford, or has the country life been wasted on you?" he asked, his tone holding that same challenging note from the night before. "I can ride, my lord," I replied, taking the groom's hand and mounting the mare with ease. "But can you keep up?" I didn't wait for an answer, nudging the mare into a trot and then a canter, heading for the entrance to Hyde Park. I heard the thunder of his stallion's hooves behind me, then beside me. We entered Rotten Row, the fashionable hour just beginning, and I was acutely aware of every lorgnette and quizzing glass turning our way. The Savage Viscount and the country nobody, already the talk of the town. We slowed to a walk under the canopy of trees. The spring air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and new blossoms. "You ride well," he conceded. "With spirit." "And you ride as if you own the ground your horse treads upon," I replied. "I generally do." We rode in silence for a few moments, the tension between us a living thing. It was not the awkward silence of strangers, but the heavy, charged quiet of two predators circling. "Why did you agree to this?" he asked abruptly, his eyes fixed straight ahead. "To meet me. To consider this arrangement. Your father implied you were willing, but the woman I met last night is not willing to be implied about." "I am here because it suits my purposes," I said honestly. "And because I was curious." "Curious? About the monster in the drawing room?" "I find the reality more nuanced." He glanced at me, his expression inscrutable. "The reality is a man who inherited a title encumbered by debt and expectation, who has spent a decade rebuilding an estate with his own hands, and who now requires an heir to secure it. A man who has little patience for the fripperies of society and less for simpering maidens who faint at a raised voice." "You describe a practical man," I observed. "Not a monster." "The monster," he said, his voice dropping, "is in the expectations. In the whispers. In the way women look at me as if I am a wolf who will devour them whole." He turned his stormy gaze on me. "You do not look at me that way." "No," I said, meeting his eyes steadily. "I do not." "Why?" "Because I see the loneliness. Because I recognize a fellow outsider. Because the sheer physical power of you does not make me want to flee, it makes me want to understand. It makes me feel alive." I did not say any of that. "Instead," I said, "perhaps I am not easily devoured, my lord." A low, rough sound escaped him, almost a laugh. "I am beginning to believe that." He reached over, his large hand covering mine where it held the reins. The heat of his touch seared through my riding glove. "Your father has presented the contract. A generous settlement. Your own household accounts. A dower house on my estate in Sussex for your use, should you require it." "Should I require it?" I echoed, my heart thudding. "I am not a fool, Eleanor." He used my Christian name, and it sounded like a vow. "This is a contract, not a love match. But I am a man of my word. I would be a faithful husband. A protective one. I would not cage you. But I would expect He paused, searching for words. An heir, I finished for him. Yes. His thumb stroked the back of my hand, a surprisingly tender gesture from such a formidable man. And your presence. I find I do not dislike your presence. It was the closest to a declaration of affection I would get, and it was worth more to me than 1,000 sonnets. I do not dislike yours either, Alexander. His name on my lips made his eyes darken. He released my hand as if burned. We will be the subject of even more gossip now, he said, his voice gruff. Let them talk, I said, lifting my chin. I have never cared for gossip. Our courtship, such as it was, became the scandal of the season. He called every day. We rode. We walked in the garden under the watchful eyes of a chaperone, my stepmother, who seemed torn between triumph and terror. We attended a few small gatherings, where Alexander's brooding presence silenced rooms and my refusal to be cowed by it drew even more stares. One evening, at a musicale at Lady Jersey's, the tension reached a breaking point. A young fop, deep in his cups, made a loud comment about Thorne finally getting a mare sturdy enough to handle his stud. The room gasped. Alexander went utterly still. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. He turned toward the man, and the look on his face was one of such controlled, lethal fury that I thought he might actually kill him. I acted before thought. I placed my hand on his arm. The muscles beneath his coat were like iron bands. Alexander, I said, my voice calm but clear in the dead silence. The aria is about to begin. Would you fetch me a glass of lemonade? I find I am quite parched. Every eye in the room was on us. Would the beast heed the leash? He looked down at my hand on his arm, then into my eyes. The fury in his gaze was slowly banked, replaced by something hotter, more complex. He covered my hand with his own, his touch possessive. Of course, he said, his voice a gravelly promise. He turned and walked away, leaving the insult unanswered, but his message was clear: she commands me, and I allow it. The buzz that followed was instantaneous. He returned with my lemonade, his expression unreadable. Later, as we prepared to leave, he helped me with my cloak. His hands lingered on my shoulders, his mouth close to my ear. No one has ever dared intercede for me before, he murmured, his breath warm on my skin. Why did you do it? Because you are not their monster, I whispered back. You are my betrothed. And I protect what is mine. That he went rigid behind me. Then, his lips brushed the sensitive spot just below my ear. A shockwave of sensation tore through me. Careful, Eleanor, he growled softly. You make me want things I have no right to want before the vows are spoken. The wedding was set for 3 weeks hence. My stepmother oversaw the preparations with martial efficiency. Clarissa avoided me, her relief palpable but tinged with a new, strange envy when she saw the way Alexander looked at me. The night before the wedding, I could not sleep. I slipped from my room in a wrapper and descended to the library, seeking a book to quiet my mind. A fire still glowed in the hearth. I was not alone. Alexander stood by the mantel, a glass of brandy in his hand, still dressed in the clothes he'd worn at dinner. He looked tormented. You should not be here, I said, though I made no move to leave. I know. He set the glass down with a sharp click. I had to see you. To be sure. Sure of what? That you are not having second thoughts. That you are not, in the quiet of the night, terrified of tomorrow. He strode toward me, stopping an arm's length away. The firelight played over the sharp planes of his face. I would release you. Even now. The scandal would be mine to bear. You could return to your country life. My heart swelled with an emotion so powerful it stole my breath. This man, accused of being a brute, was offering me my freedom at the cost of his own honor. I closed the distance between us. I am not terrified, Alexander. I am impatient. His eyes blazed. Eleanor. They talk of your size, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I reached out, placing my palm flat against his chest, feeling the powerful beat of his heart through his waistcoat. They whisper of the pain. But what if it is not pain I imagine? What if I imagine pleasure? What if I have dreamed of your hands on me? Of what it might feel like to be overwhelmed by you? A ragged groan tore from his throat. He captured my face in his hands, his touch surprisingly gentle. You are playing with fire, little lioness. Then let us burn, I breathed. He kissed me. It was not a gentle, exploratory kiss. It was a claiming. A conflagration. His mouth was hot and demanding on mine, and I met him with equal fervor, my arms twining around his neck. He tasted of brandy and desperation and pure, untamed male. His hands slid from my face, down my back, pulling me flush against him. I felt the hard, thick evidence of his arousal pressed against my belly, and a corresponding ache bloomed deep within me. The rumors were not exaggerated. The sheer size of him should have frightened me. Instead, it ignited a primal, thrilling curiosity. He broke the kiss, resting his forehead against mine, both of us breathing heavily. Tomorrow, he vowed, his voice raw with promise. Tomorrow, you will be mine. In every way. And I will spend a lifetime proving that you were right not to run. The wedding at St. George's was a spectacle. The ton turned out in force, eager to see the sacrificial lamb led to the altar. They saw a lamb with her head held high, and a groom who could not tear his eyes from her. When he placed the ring on my finger, his hand trembled ever so slightly. When the vicar pronounced us man and wife, he did not kiss me chastely on the cheek. He cupped my face and kissed me, deeply and thoroughly, right there before God and the gaping congregation. A collective gasp echoed through the church. He didn't care. The wedding breakfast at my father's house was a blur. Soon, we were in his carriage, my carriage now, rolling toward Thorne House, his principal London residence. It was a massive, imposing building on a quiet, prestigious square. He carried me over the threshold, his arms effortlessly bearing my weight. The staff lined up in the grand foyer, but he barely acknowledged them. "Welcome home, Lady Thorne," he said, his eyes holding mine. He dismissed the servants and led me up a sweeping staircase to the master's chambers. A connecting door stood open, revealing 2 rooms, his, all dark wood and leather, and mine, a surprisingly airy space in shades of cream and sage green. "This is yours," he said, his voice tight. "The door has a lock. On your side." The significance of that gesture, giving me the power to lock him out, unmanned me more than any passion ever could. He was showing me, in every way he knew how, that he was not the monster. I walked to the connecting door and closed it. I heard his sharp intake of breath. Then I turned the key, locking it. I saw the pain flash in his eyes before he could mask it. I walked to him, holding the key out in my palm. "I have no need for this," I said softly. Then I tossed it onto the dressing table. "Do you?" In answer, he swept me into his arms and carried me to the large bed. He laid me down as if I were made of the porcelain he despised, then followed me down, his weight braced on his arms. "Tell me to stop," he rasped, his eyes searching mine. "At any moment. Tell me, and I stop." I reached up and traced the line of his jaw. "Don't you dare stop." What followed was not a gentle initiation. It was a revelation. He was, as rumored, magnificently, intimidatingly large. But he was also patient, devastatingly attentive, a man who worshipped with his hands and mouth before claiming with his body. There was a moment of sharp, stretching pain, and I cried out, my nails digging into his shoulders. He froze, his body taut with the effort of holding still. "Eleanor. Don't stop," I breathed again, kissing his shoulder. "Just go slowly." He did. With agonizing, exquisite slowness, he moved, his eyes never leaving my face, whispering my name like a prayer. The pain receded, replaced by a feeling of fullness, of connection, then by sparks of pleasure that built into a wildfire. He watched me unravel beneath him, my climax crashing over me with a force that stole my voice and my sight. Only then did he allow his own control to shatter, his release following with a deep, guttural cry of my name. Afterward, he gathered me to him, my head on his chest, his heart thundering under my ear. He pressed a kiss to my hair. "The rumors," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "The pain." I tilted my head up to look at him. There was a moment. But then. There was you. And it was not pain I felt, Alexander. It was glory. He pulled me tighter, his arms a fortress around me. In that moment, I knew my plan had irrevocably shifted. I had set out to make him crave me. I had not anticipated that I would crave him just as desperately. That I would fall irrevocably, dangerously in love with my husband. The weeks following our wedding were a lesson in sensual discovery. Alexander, having found a wife who did not fear his passions but welcomed them, was a man unleashed. Yet his intensity was always tempered with a tenderness that left me breathless. He was fiercely protective, absurdly generous, and surprisingly witty in private. The monster of the ton was, in the sanctuary of our home, a man of deep intellect and dry humor. But the outside world did not disappear. The curious and the malicious still watched. At the Huxley ball, 6 weeks into our marriage, I felt their eyes upon me, looking for signs of weariness, of fear, of bruises. I wore a gown of deep ruby silk, and I held my husband's arm with a pride that was entirely genuine. Lady Cooper, a notorious gossip, sidled up to me while Alexander was fetching me champagne. "My dear Lady Thorne," she cooed, her eyes sharp as needles. "You look remarkably well. Country vigor must be truly restorative. One hears so many alarming things, but you seem to have weathered the storm." That I smiled, a slow, feline smile. "What storm, Lady Cooper?" "I find marriage to Lord Thorne to be nothing but sunshine." I let my gaze drift to where Alexander stood, head and shoulders above the crowd, watching me with a possessive heat that was unmistakable. Blazing, relentless sunshine, she blushed and retreated. Alexander returned, handing me a glass. "What did the harpy want?" "To see if you had broken me yet." His expression darkened. "I would sooner break my own bones." "I know," I said, touching his arm. "And that is why I told her ours is a marriage of blazing sunshine." He laughed, a rich, warm sound that turned several heads. "Is that what we are? Blazing sunshine?" "Among other things," I murmured, sipping my champagne. Later that night, in our bed, he proved just how many other things we were. As I lay spent and boneless in his arms, he traced idle patterns on my bare shoulder. "I have business at Thorne Crest, the estate in Sussex," he said. "I must leave for a fortnight. Come with me." It was not a request, but I heard the need beneath the command. Of course. Thorne Crest was not a pretty country house, it was a raw, powerful fortress of grey stone overlooking the sea. It suited him perfectly. Here, away from the stifling eyes of London, he was a different man, relaxed, at ease in his domain. We walked the wild cliffs, toured the prosperous home farm, and spent long evenings by the fire in the library, talking of everything and nothing. It was here, in the wild solitude, that I realized my courses were late. A flutter of hope, bright and terrifying, took root in my heart. I said nothing, waiting, wanting to be sure. One afternoon, as we picnicked on a cliff top overlooking the churning sea, a wave of nausea overtook me. I turned aside, pressing a hand to my mouth. Alexander was at my side in an instant. "Eleanor. What is it? Are you ill?" His concern was immediate, overwhelming. I took a steadying breath, the salt air clearing my head. I looked into his worried storm-gray eyes and placed his hand low on my abdomen. I do not believe I am ill, Alexander. I believe I am with child. The shock that crossed his face was absolute. Then it transformed into a joy so profound it was almost painful to witness. He dropped to his knees before me, right there on the grass, and pressed his ear to my belly. So soon? He whispered, his voice thick. It would seem your country-bred wife is as hardy as advertised, I said, my fingers tangling in his dark hair. He looked up at me, his eyes shining. A child. Our child. He surged to his feet, sweeping me into his arms and spinning me around, his laughter echoing over the cliffs. Eleanor, my lioness. You have made me the happiest of men. The happiness of that moment was a beacon. But beacons attract storms. We returned to London so I could be seen by a physician, who confirmed the pregnancy. The news spread, as news does. Congratulations were offered, many of them genuine. But I saw the speculative looks. Would she survive the birth? Given the father's size. Alexander became impossibly more protective, a dragon guarding his hoard. His temper, usually on a tight leash, flared at the slightest perceived threat. When a footman stumbled while carrying a heavy tray near me, Alexander's roar of fury shook the crystals in the chandelier. It took me an hour to calm him, to remind him I was not made of glass. The true storm, however, came from an unexpected quarter, Clarissa. My stepsister had become engaged to a bland but amiable baronet. Yet, she grew increasingly sullen. One day, she called at Thorne House. Alexander was out at his club. She sat in the drawing room, her perfect features pinched. You seem happy, she said, her tone accusatory. I am, I replied, my hand resting on my still flat stomach. He hasn't hurt you? No, Clarissa. He has not. Tears filled her winter blue eyes. I was so afraid. And now you have everything. The title, the wealth, a child on the way. And he looks at you as if you hung the moon. It isn't fair. I was the one who was supposed to have the grand marriage. A pang of sympathy cut through me. You have a good man, Clarissa. A kind one. That is worth more than any title. You can say that now, she snapped, standing. You won. The country mouse turned out to be the queen of the beasts. She fled the room in a rustle of silk. I pushed the unpleasant visit aside, focusing on my health and my husband. As my body began to change, Alexander's fascination was boundless. He would talk to my belly, kiss it goodnight, and marvel at the life growing within. The pregnancy, however, was not easy. The nausea was persistent, and by the 5th month, I grew enormous. The physician, a dour man, confirmed what I had already begun to suspect during an examination. It is not one child, my lady, he said. It is 2. A twin pregnancy. Twins. The shock was immense. Alexander, who had been pacing outside, was summoned. When told, he turned pale. Twins. But the risk is greater, the physician confirmed. You are a robust woman, Lady Thorne, but you must prepare for a difficult confinement. And you, my lord, must prepare for the possibility of. Enough, Alexander growled, his voice deadly. You will do everything in your power to ensure her safety. Everything. Or you will answer to me. The final months were a trial. I was heavy, awkward, and often in discomfort. Alexander rarely left my side. He read to me, rubbed my aching feet, and held me through sleepless nights. His fear was a palpable shadow in the room, but his love was the light that kept it at bay. The labor began on a blustery November night. It was long and harrowing. Alexander defied all convention and refused to be barred from the room. He stayed by my head, gripping my hand, his face a mask of anguish with every pain that racked me. I'm sorry, my love, I'm so sorry, he whispered over and over, wiping my brow. After what felt like an eternity, our son entered the world with a furious cry. But the ordeal was not over. Our daughter, stubborn, took her time. Exhaustion threatened to pull me under. Alexander's voice was my anchor, pulling me back. One more, Eleanor. My brave lioness. One more for me. With a final, desperate push, our daughter was born. The cries of 2 infants filled the room. I collapsed back, utterly spent. Alexander cut the cords with trembling hands, his eyes never leaving my face, which was streaked with tears and sweat. He kissed my forehead, his own tears falling onto my skin. Never again, he vowed, his voice breaking. I will never put you through that again. You are my heart, Eleanor. My entire heart. They placed the babies in my arms, a son with a shock of dark hair like his father, and a daughter with auburn curls like mine. Perfect. Beautiful. Ours. The physician beamed. A healthy boy and girl, my lord. And her ladyship, while exhausted, is well. Alexander looked at our children, then at me, his expression one of awe so complete it transcended his usual severity. You have given me a world, he said softly. Recovery was slow but steady. Alexander was a doting, if slightly terrified, father. He held the tiny infants as if they were made of gossamer, his large hands impossibly gentle. He changed nappies, walked the floor at night, and was utterly enslaved by his daughter's first gummy smile. One evening, as we sat together in the nursery, our son, William Alexander, and our daughter, Eleanor Rose, sleeping in their cradles, he took my hand. When your father proposed the match, he said, his gaze on our children, I agreed because I needed an heir. I expected a transaction. A quiet, respectful coexistence. He lifted my hand to his lips. I never expected you. I never expected this. This hurricane of feeling. You looked at me and saw a man, not a myth. You challenged me, calmed me, ignited me. You made me crave you, heart and soul. Tears welled in my eyes. And you, my lord, I whispered, made me feel cherished, desired, and utterly, completely loved. You are not the monster they feared. You are the man I needed. He drew me into his arms, our little family cocooned in the firelight. The rumors of the angry, reclusive Viscount were forever put to rest by the reality of a devoted husband and besotted father. And the country-bred girl they thought sacrificed. She had won not just a title and a fortune, but a passionate, enduring love. We had our blazing sunshine, our storms, and our peace. We had our beautiful twins. And we had, against all odds and gossip, our own perfectly imperfect, scandalously passionate, and wonderfully happy ever after. The end. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, comment and subscribe so that we are encouraged to keep bringing you more of these stories. Moral of the story. True strength lies not in conforming to society's expectations, but in daring to see beyond rumors, embracing your own power, and choosing a love that is both passionate and respectful. Sometimes the greatest matches are made not by convenience, but by courage. Backhand index pointing right. If you enjoy historical romance, strong heroines, and brooding heroes with hidden hearts, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more romantic tales.